What if I told you a story was built so well, printed, seeded, and leaked across formats, that people began to live inside it? What if a fake archive, mailed pamphlets, and a few message board posts could grow into a tangible cultural force, an early prototype of the alternate reality game, a laboratory for modern mythcraft? This is Ongs Hat, a little ghost town in the Pine Barrens, an elaborate set of Incunabula documents, and a mimetic experiment that blurred the line between fiction and reality. In this video, we'll go through what it claimed, how it spread, why it stuck, who made it and why, the ethical fallout, wild what-if scenarios, and what the whole thing tells us about myth, magic, and the power of seeded stories. At its heart, the Ongs Hat narrative presents itself like a found archive. Recruitment letters, lab notes, photocopied reports, and eyewitness testimony stitched together into a dossier. The story it tells can be summarized in mythic beats. Princeton renegade scientists tinker with a device, sometimes called the egg, that manipulates consciousness and reality. They test it in laboratories, in ashrams, and in a strange compound around a tiny place called Ongs Hat in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. Some experimenters allegedly step through a portal and vanish into an alternate pocket world. Others return changed. The documents read like science, feel like mysticism, and smell faintly of Cold War paranoia. It's a hybrid story, part lab report, part travelogue, part occult manual. It is intentionally ambiguous. Is it report? Is it art? Is it a prank? That ambiguity is the point. The myth's media life began in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Originating in zine culture and mail art, the Incunabula packets, photocopied pages, diagrams, and pseudo-scholarly citations were distributed into the underground. From there, the story migrated to bulletin boards, Usenet newsgroups, and early web pages. In each medium, pieces were added, copied, and remixed. People posted fragments, replied with embellishments, scanned documents, and reposted them. The distribution strategy was part of the design. Seed disparate, plausible fragments across formats and audiences, then let pattern seekers and rumor networks stitch the narrative together. By the mid-1990s, the material had been compiled into collections, sold as chapbooks, and embraced by communities who loved found document aesthetics. Over time, Ongs Hat came to be cited as an ancestor of the ARG form. Not a single game, but a proof of concept. Stories can be engineered to emerge when communities collaborate. Why did Ongs Hat feel real to so many people? There are a few critical strategies at work. First, anchoring. The story tied itself to a real geography, the Pine Barrens, a landscape already steeped in legend. A real place makes fiction plausible. Second, scholarly veneer. The creators used faux bibliographies, footnotes, and scanned paperwork, all the trappings of authority. That archival costume convinces people faster than a good claim. Third, transmedia seeding. Different fragments appeared in different places. No single source gave the whole story. The audience completed the narrative through their own detective work, a mimetic co-creation. Fourth, cultural resonance. The tale mixed forbidden physics, spiritual practice, and institutional paranoia, a cocktail tailor-made for late 20th century anxieties. Science plus mysticism plus conspiracy is highly mimetic. And finally, invitation to participate. The documents invited legend tripping and creative response. People didn't just consume Ongs Hat. They argued about it, added to it, and sometimes even staged pilgrimages to the Pine Barrens. The story's logic levered our urge to make meaning. Where we find fragments of a pattern, we fill in the rest, and sometimes we act as if the pattern is real. Joseph Matheny is the name most closely tied to the modern Ongs Hat Incunabula. He and collaborators crafted pamphlets and a corpus, later collected and published. Interviews and later commentary make clear, at least in public, that much of this was intended as fiction and as transmedia art, an experiment in seeding a narrative across formats and audiences. That said, good fiction often behaves like a virus. It escapes the author's control once it's loose. Matheny has described his project as provocative storytelling, designed to get readers to question authority and perception. But intention and reception are not the same. As with many hoaxes and faux archives, a segment of the audience chose to treat Ongs' hat as factual. That reaction is part of the experiment's result. Here's where things get thorny. Creating a narrative that feels real comes with responsibility. Even when a project's intent is artful or playful, it can produce real-world harm. People have a capacity to believe and to act on belief. Encouraging pilgrimages to private land, fueling cultic formations, or seeding paranoid delusions. These are ethical risks inherent to any mimetic experiment. Matheny and others reportedly attempted to set rules, to discourage cult formation or dangerous acts. But once a narrative enters the wild, authors can't fully control how it's used. That ambiguity, the deliberate blurring of fiction and fact, is part of what makes Ongs' hat instructive and also potentially dangerous. Now let's play the counterfactual, purely imaginative, but useful. If the egg or the portal ideas were literally true, if a technology existed that could fold consciousness into alternate pocket realities, then everything changes. Technology that lets you step out of the consensus world creates asymmetries of power. Who controls access to other worlds? Military agencies, private cults, rental portals for the wealthy? The geopolitics alone would be nightmarish. On the psychological level, it would validate the idea that belief and narrative can open actual ontological doors. Memes become literal world builders. That's both magical and terrifying. If shared focus and ritual can instantiate a new locus of reality, then storycraft becomes policy. The ethical stakes would be enormous. Consent, exploitation, and the commodification of other worlds all appear. But remember, the more plausible the fiction, the more dangerous its misuse. Ongs' hat is useful as a thought experiment precisely because it shows how narrative can reorganize behavior, whether or not alternate worlds exist. This is the part where Ongs' hat becomes a mirror for what we do on this channel. We talk a lot about ego-froms, psyche flow, and how ideas move like organisms. Ongs' hat is a case study in mimetic engineering, in how a story can act like an egregore, a thought form that grows as people feed it attention. The Incunabula planted a seed and the community watered it. That process is the same mechanism magicians have used for millennia: create a form, charge it, and let it act. If your ego is a closed system that projects pain outward, then a well-engineered myth is a closed system on a cultural scale. It channels energies, organizes groups, and stabilizes identities. Ongs' hat shows how storycraft can be magical, not because spells are true, but because shared attention makes patterns. Patterns that change behavior, create rituals, and sometimes build new institutions. It also shows the other side, the power of counter-myth. If a story can bind people into a harmful loop, another story can liberate them. That's why mythcraft matters. It's a toolkit for rewilding meaning, for composting old dogmas into generative narratives. Your mycelial metaphors, if you like, for restoring flow. Ongs' hat is many things: art project, hoax, early ARG, mimetic case study, and a cautionary tale. It taught us that a story seeded well enough can escape the author and become a lived reality. That's where danger and possibility meet. If you're into magic, that should thrill and terrify you in equal measure. Because magic is nothing but applied narrative, intention, ritual, and repetition. Use that craft with care. If you want the Incunabula scans I referenced, I'll link them in the description. If you want a deep dive episode where we read the primary texts and annotate them live, tell me in the comments. And if you liked this tour through myth and media, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves strange digital folklore. This is My The Magic, where we compost old stories, plant new ones, and keep the psyche flowing. See you next time.